Welcome in. This is Winning Cures Everything, July 10th, Friday. I am once again without Gary, but I've got my friend John Lacombe's 1/3 of Westlot Pirates, our friends from Northwestern. Had Sam on yesterday. I completely jacked up that, but we got a podcast out of it. Hopefully this works better. How you doing, John?
Not bad, man. I guess considering we're all kind of hanging on, but yeah. So far so good. Yeah. Anyway, I think we'll get to it in a little bit, but I guess we're to the point where the Big Ten's issuing news that some people consider a bad thing, and I'm basically like, I'm treating it like a good thing. Anything that I can hang on to at this point.
Yeah, as long as we get sports, I'm okay. Gary and I have talked about this before. This year, I'm willing to throw all traditions, all customs out the window to get something. Okay.
Yep.
This is one of those things where Christmas dinner is usually a huge spread. All right. If I get a ham sandwich, I'm really happy right now.
Exactly.
So let's get into it a little bit. First, I'll introduce you a little bit more. You are probably you've surpassed one person in my life. Okay. My favorite person in the world to argue with and fight with has been one of my best friends in the world. His name's Trey. He's an attorney. He argues for a living, all right? And we agree on some things, we disagree on some things, and when we disagree, it's fun because he's really smart and hard to argue with, and I like that. I think you're my new favorite person that I like to argue with, but what's been weird lately is in our group chat, you make a lot of sense, and I kind of want to read your text and think, how can I disagree with this? I don't. I like it. I like what he's saying. We're on the same page. But you've become that person in my life that you challenge the way I think a whole lot, and I appreciate it.
Well, usually it has something to do with, I'm a New Hampshire boy, so New England sports, born and bred, etc. And then, when you're someone like that and you leave the Northeast, one of two things happens. Either you double down, like Bill Simmons style, you double down like 500%, or you kind of emerge from the fog and go, wow, everyone is just us against the world up there. And that's what I did. And then you find someone like a random northern Mississippi boy who has sold his soul to New England sports. And I don't even know where to go with that. So I'd say that's a source of about 90% of our arguments. But
I'll take it. I'm excited about it. So let's get into it. You guys are Big Ten country. Right now you're going through your Big Ten previews. Yep. Which is my favorite time of the year with your podcast, Westlot Pirates. You can find them on any podcast network. And I love going through it and listening to it because you break down every team in the Big Ten. What do you think the basic state of Big Ten football is right now compared to the rest of the country? And what do you see going forward? Strengths, weaknesses, that sort of stuff.
Well, it's funny because the way you say that, like, you're absolutely right. We get so deep in the weeds on every one of these teams, especially in the summer, that for us, there's just so many moving pieces to it. I think when you get outside of the Big Ten and you look at the rest of the country, people are mainly going to view the quality of the conference from like, okay, so in what way does the Big Ten enter the national discussion, right? And I think this season in particular is a really strong season from that perspective because Ohio State's going to be so good. And I think because we're used to doing this, we've been doing this 10 years, we've been previewing this, doing these summer previews for 10 years. We're really kind of used to following the rises and falls of like Ohio State, right? And we all know Ohio State's loaded with talent year in and year out. And then it's always a question of, okay, so like, what do we think they're going to be doing as far as like capitalizing on that talent, et cetera? And I think what separates this Ohio State team from a lot of the ones in the past, and certainly of the late Urban Meyer era, is, and this isn't to throw shade at Urban, it's just to say they have as good of a collection of coaches on that team right now as you are going to find anywhere, really. I mean, you're talking, you've got Madison, Washington, Larry Johnson Sr., that's just on the defensive side of the ball. And then, on the offense side, you've got you've got Day running the whole show, and then Kevin Wilson with the offense. But they're returning so much on that offense. And even though they lose Chase Young and, more importantly, a ton of the secondary on the defense, they've got a ton coming back there. But I think more than that, there's this perception that even though their secondary coach is now Boston College's head coach, they still return so much coaching, so much talent, and there's a stability there. So it's like their defense is probably going to be top 3 or 4. Their offense might be the best offense in the country. And this feels like their year. Like I don't think just about anyone's gonna argue that, if you're betting, it's Clemson Ohio State title game, right?
I think you're right. Alabama, LSU just lost the 2 best quarterbacks in the history of both those schools.
Right. So exactly. So it kind of feels like the stars are aligned for Ohio State this year. If you look at the conference beyond that, to your earlier question, are there teams that are really strong in certain areas? Absolutely. I mean, like, there's an argument to be made that the best player in the country is Micah Parsons at Penn State. Like, he's that good. And best, Wisconsin's going to be in play for best overall defense in the country. What Jim Leonard's doing there is just like mind blowing.
Yes.
But in terms of completeness, Ohio State lords over everything. And I think they're going to be probably the first, second, or third ranked team in the country all season long. And I think because of that, the Big Ten is going to be in the discussion all season long. So I would say there have been years where there were a stronger top 5 or 6 teams in the conference than there are right now. But they're even as good as Ohio State is year in and year out, there aren't as many years where everyone is just like, look, this is very likely the best team in the country. They're going to be riding towards the national title game all season. And that's definitely what we have this year.
So let me ask you this. You brought up Penn State. A lot of people have Penn State as a top 3 to 5. I don't know anybody that has them lower than 5 realistically in a preseason ranking. You think they're going to be that good? You think they're going to live up to that? Is Franklin at that level now?
No. Well, we ought to go get Scuzz on here, and he could give you a James Franklin diatribe. We have Scuzz's feelings, and this is Eric Scalzbo from our pod's feelings on James Franklin are amazing and always worth our time. But I would say Penn State's defense is so good. It all revolves around Parsons, and that sounds simplistic, but it's rare that you got a guy who's so good that the whole rest can revolve around him. Penn State really hasn't seen a guy like that since LeVar Arrington. I mean, Parsons is that good. But offensively, I think you look at that and you can juxtapose them with Michigan, a team that they're probably going to play a nail biter with this season. And these are 2 teams that are probably going to be really strong on defense, but they're going to have real problems on offense. And I think it's just like, is Penn State going to be near the top of that conference? Absolutely, because their defense is going to be so strong and it's just going to stone 3/4 of the teams that they play. But I would say, aside from Ohio State, every other team in the conference has some real warts, and that includes Penn State. It's just not a perfect offensive football team, and they lose, some real pieces on that offense. So, again, like top 5, I don't know. Like that defense is going to carry them a long way. I mean, it's a strong defensive conference, and the top shelf
is the defense Parsons and then a separation gap. Are they loaded on defense, and he's just a monster?
It's
because Ohio State had Chase Young last year, but the rest of the defense was elite. LSU didn't have a single elite player, but they were 4- and 5-star amazing talent across the board.
It was weird because again, I don't want to step on our Penn State preview too much because we haven't
released that yet, and you haven't got to that. I get it. Yeah.
But without getting into it too much, I think Penn State almost did a total identity reversal last year on defense. It's really kind of stunning because the year before, that was the best pass rushing team in the nation.
In the country, yeah. No, they were incredible.
They basically did like a gut rebuild.
They didn't get after the quarterback at all, and they played it
right for no reason other than they realized they had the best player in the country, maybe, and they wanted to rebuild things around him, and it totally worked.
Yeah,
and I think now their identity is firmly set around him and stopping the run, almost kind of like as a more Michigan State mold, which is ironic because like who knows what Michigan State's going to be this year, but traditionally that's the way they operate, and it's the same kind of thing.
You're in a conference where stopping the run's a big deal. I mean, the Big Ten is still – the SEC used to be that, and we have very much molded into you got to be an offensive juggernaut if you really want to win an SEC title and a national title. I think the Big Ten is still very defense, run the football heavy. So let's get off the top two guys, and we'll transition to Northwestern specifically in a minute and what's happening in the Big Ten right now overall. But do you think so? Rutgers aside, okay. Where do you really think because y'all have I would say you have a very large middle class that is really competitive.
Yeah.
And from year to year can be good. Northwestern coming off one of the worst seasons that I can remember them having. Most disappointing, definitely, after competing for the Big Ten title the previous year. But I just feel like anybody can have the season you guys had last year because there's a middle class there where there's not a lot of easy wins anytime when you're in conference.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. And I think one team, again, and we haven't done 3/4 of our previews.
Yeah, we're just getting started on that.
I mean, we've all done the research. We've done certainly the research. And I think that's why, for example, if you've seen a team like Minnesota fall off a cliff this year and the rest of the nation is shocked and like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that happen. Like, don't say we didn't warn you that something like that could happen. I think people look for narratives like that, but you take a team like Minnesota has massive turnover. And despite, the kind of PJ Fleckissance, there's not too much talent coming in, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to deal with all of that. And given everything you said and given like the potential competitiveness of the conference. With that said, I think when you step back, I think there is a really defined underclass in the conference right now. And I mean, obviously, like you said, it starts with Rutgers, which is they're on an island by themselves. But Maryland is rapidly arriving down in that area. Maryland's defense this year is going to be, it's going to be absolutely epically bad.
So they do look like the one team that's going to play a Big 12 football. They're going to punt on defense and try to build an offensive explosion and see what can happen. They can score 28 points.
Which was the plan last year, and then it all went sideways. But Illinois underclass. I think people who think they were a cute story last year are unaware of just how unbelievably lucky that team was. And then, of course, the one who's surviving by laundry alone at this point, which is Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska is not a contender in the conference. They're fighting for
contender in the division.
Right. They're fighting for mid-level right now.
Yeah, they're trying to become, in that middle class that I was referring to, talent-wise. They got the money, they got the facilities, they got the school, and they got the fan base. But that big red machine don't go out there and line up and stop people from scoring. No. And anybody can score on them.
Right. I think the flip side is now you've got, I'd say, the emergence of Purdue and especially Indiana. But both of those teams, I think Indiana is, at this specific moment, probably solidly the 6th or 7th best team in the conference. What Tom Allen's doing there is really good. We've previewed them already, and they're an excellent offensive team if Michael Penix doesn't get hurt. And their defense is not half bad. It's not nearly what the Kevin Wilsons were. And then Purdue's basically like, we're only going to play on one side of the ball all season, and it just might work for us. They're going to play 100% offensive football, and you're not going to see much better offensive football, and they're going to give up 40 points a game.
One thing I say about the Big Ten, and I've said this for the last couple of years, I'm going to stand by it. It's the best coached conference in the country, and I don't think that's close, by the way. I don't think that's close. I think teams that are not great, Purdue struggling to kind of stay relevant in that middle class level, whatever. I very well coached football. There ain't a lot of bad coaches in that conference.
Right.
And that I think that gives a lot of class to it, and I think that's what keeps it as competitive as Big Ten football is.
It is, and I mean, I think it's deep. And again, that's to go back to Ohio State. They're you won't find a better collection of coaches
That's
in
right.
the country. You've got multiple guys who've been head coaches on that team. You've got guys where I think they're fortunate to have a guy like, let's say, Larry Johnson Sr., right? Who he's a guy who could have a bunch of jobs other places and is content being just the defensive line coach at Ohio State. And then above him, a guy like Madison, who, could be a head coach, content to be their DC. And of course, Day is the question for him is NFL or is he staying at Ohio State? I mean, that's a guy whose ceiling is whatever he wants to set it at, right? And Wilson, who's done that. I mean, he was at Oklahoma forever, then Indiana. Like, this is a guy who, in theory, could return to, another head coaching job if he wants to down the road. And they're just stacked at coaching, and it makes a big difference. And then, you go through the rest of the conference. But on the other hand, I think, you get to a situation where, let's say, a guy like Lovie Smith, who carried that defensive reputation from the NFL, like a classic, even as far back as like Tampa, like a classic Tampa 2 innovator. And now it's like, yeah, but what are you now? Because this is a coaching conference, and like, how do you measure up in that group? So, I think I wouldn't disagree. I think there are certain people, and I'm sure in Ann Arbor they would wholeheartedly agree, that could use a little bit more innovation, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and the same kind of things that you might see for example, Penn State, right, playing Memphis in their bowl game. It feels like Penn State is slapping at that gnat the entire game, being like, we just don't see this in the conference. And these guys are just throwing all over us, and Parsons is running around and putting up like 25 tackles or whatever the hell he had that game. But Memphis is still scoring points, and Penn State's like, what even is this? And it's like, it's quality coaching. Like you said, hard, big time defense, mainly run oriented football. But with one perfect team at the top of the heap right now.
They really are that. So let's get off of that. Let's move to the schedule. Yesterday, had some hint that this might be happening the day before. Yesterday, news drops as soon as Sam and I finished recording that the Big Ten is absolutely going to do in-conference only schedule, getting rid of all the non-con games and playing amongst themselves. What do you think about this? And then I've got some thoughts. Some of these I listened to and read Dan Wetzel from Yahoo talk about it, and he brings up some interesting things that I thought I'm okay with all of this happening, by the way, because it means I get some football every week. So I'm good with it. What do you think about the conference-only scheduling?
Well, first of all, right, I mean, we talked about it right off the top that I think you're trying to grasp for anything, right, at this point. So it's kind of like, I take this as like, good, that means we're going to have football, means they're trying to do something. I think right off the bat, the first thing everyone said is, okay, so I guess we're just going to lop off the non-con and go from there. It's a little bit more complicated than that first, though, because one, they're talking about adding another conference game, which means like
9 or 10. So they're thinking about maybe 10. They haven't said that yet.
Right. So if they do that, I mean, right off the bat, like, we're Northwestern people, we always start our previews with our 4-no plays, right? Which is Rutgers, Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan. You listen to that group, obviously it makes a big difference to us which one of those teams we get picked, right? It could be Rutgers, it could be Ohio State. That's basically win versus loss. So that's part of it. The other part of it is, not all schedules are created the same. Now, on one hand, you could say like, okay, so they're losing Washington, that date at Washington to start things off, and Ohio State's losing a date with Oregon.
Correct.
But you also have like some basic scheduling things. Most of the teams in the conference, I think, would begin conference play 3 non-cons, and begin conference play on September 26th. We're one of the teams that doesn't. We start right off the top against Michigan State Labor Day weekend. So then the question is, all right, so is their goal to push everything back like 3 weeks? Or is their goal to just spread things out and create more gaps? And they've kind of said a little bit of all of that. So I think after everyone blinked for a second, everyone was like, look, I don't necessarily. So for example, if we're adding a team, those 4 teams that I mentioned are no plays. None of those 4 teams has a bye the same week as our bye. and none of those 4 teams has a bye the same week that we play Morgan State, which has been ripped from our schedule, in November, which means you can't just do a plug and play for us. You can't just take one of those 4 games and plug it into that spot.
But I guarantee you, if you take away your non-conference games and take away their non-conference games, you basically have 4 open weeks that you can fit one of those teams in.
Right. But then the question is, if the goal is to push everything back and give yourselves a little bit more breathing room, that goes out the window if you start.
I don't think that's happening, by the way. I actually don't think that's happening.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, initially you're like, well, if the goal was to just take everyone's bye week out, start the 26th, and go 10 straight games all the way through, I think they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and just rewrite the schedules.
So that's Wetzel brought that up, and Wetzel said, if I was going to do this, and I'm the commissioner and I'm making the statement to do this, which I actually think this will spiral into all Power 5 teams, conferences, and probably a lot of the G5s are going to do the same thing. If I were in control of that, I would throw the schedule out completely, and I would basically work in 2-week gaps, because you're not doing anything with fans. You're not preparing 4 or 5 weeks out for a team that you're going to play 6 months from now or 3 months from now or whatever. That's not how football works. If you basically came up with a 4-week schedule, and then by the time week 2 is done, you have the next 2 weeks planned out, and say, okay, we're going to do these 2 games. That gives you flexibility on, let's say a team gets hit really bad with the coronavirus and they need to quarantine as a team for 2 weeks. So, all right, we haven't even scheduled this thing out past 4 weeks. So we'll take them out of play for 2, and we basically have 3 months to get in 9 to 10 games. And there's plenty of time to do that, but you have to be okay with throwing tradition out the window. You have to be okay with, if Ohio State, Michigan needs to happen in week 4 and not at the end of the year, Alabama, Auburn has to, like, these big traditional rivalries have to happen in these types of settings. That's fine, because I'm willing to give anything I have to give to get something this year.
Right. No, I think that's the thing. And I think the Big Ten is part of them. Thing behind closed doors. They're like, look, we just need to usher Ohio State through this season and get them to the playoff.
Yeah.
And then we can say, so, but I do think you're right. And I think, to your point about tradition, one thing that they're going to have to do probably is, what I would imagine is, they're going to rip the non-cons off the schedule. They're going to look and they're going to be like, look, all right, we want to preserve the 9 opponents every team already had, and we want to try to preserve who's home and who's away. Because Lord have mercy, if like Ohio State has to go to Ann Arbor 2 years in a row, or vice versa 2 years in a row, people will lose their minds.
Well, I mean, it does suck if you're hosting your big rival this year. That sucks for you, because you're basically going to play an away game, a neutral site game, and an away game 3 years in a row. LSU had to have that happen with Florida, and it's just, when the hurricane happened, they put it in Baton Rouge. They gave them literally 34 hours, 36 hours, something like that, to sell tickets and get fans in there. They had 800 people show up to the game, and that counted as LSU's home game. So 2 years back-to-back, Florida played. So we basically played at Florida, played at LSU, then played at LSU again with nothing, and then played at Florida back-to-back. They had 90,000 people strong both games we played there, and it sucked. It sucked bad. And
consider, Ohio State's toughest game on their existing schedule with a bullet is their trip to Penn State.
That's right.
In a normal year,
whiteout, right?
Well, it's nighttime, whiteout, mob scene. Now
they're going to get to do that. They'll play that game at noon. Fox will pick it up, and it'll be the noon kickoff, because nobody cares and no fans will be in the stands.
Right. It's a strange season, and I think it's. Like I said, I think they'll go to the drawing board. They'll figure out how they're going to lay these games out. I mean, like I said, if you go online right now, that's been ripped out. You can't find any Big Ten schedules right now. That includes at our site. It's not that they've pulled non-cons. It's that they've pulled the whole schedule. I think what they're going to do is they're going to preserve the homes and aways. They're going to figure out how they're going to do the spacing of those 9 games for each team. Maybe they add a 10th game and then they put it back up. But I think you're right. They might try to stretch it all out. But I'll
tell you Wetzel's plan of just schedule it 2 weeks in advance. Get the first 4 weeks done, and then after the 2 weeks, you add 2 more weeks to it. Because if a team gets sick and needs to back out for 2 weeks, and you've got the whole schedule plan, now it's a huge pain in the ass to pull and swap and adjust. But who really cares ESPN probably cares because of broadcasting and Fox, but they'll still have the rights the way they have them and to be able to draft them up a month in advance no matter what. So it's not like game day's going to the game and you have to plan around that. And game day also makes up where they go kind of the week before, even if we did have that. So
right.
I think Wetzel's plan was the best thing I've heard so far, which is let's just make a month-long schedule that we're going to try and start with. And if somebody gets sick and we have to kick down the road, we basically have 3 months to get in 9 or 10 games. That's not that complicated. Every team could have a 2-week quarantine and we still finish in 3 months.
I think where it's going to get really messy is, to the credit, I'm glad they are, but these teams all have the ability to test right now. And I think you look at like a Clemson, you look at an LSU, what you see when the tests are coming out is you see a ton of these guys are testing positive. And I think that's where things are going to get messy because, to your point, right, it's like normally you'd be like, oh, shoot, like a flu bug ripped through this team this week. What you're going to have with this is not that. You're going to have a team where, let's say, 10 guys who look and feel fine the week of a game come up with a positive test. And then it's like, I guess you can't play those guys. Like, you've got to like work around that. But it's going to be really strange because obviously, especially as New York City's doing their heavy duty testing and stuff like that, we're finding out just how contagious this thing is.
Yes.
So it's like, real talk, for college athletes, very few of those guys are going to show symptoms, but a ton of them are going to test positive, and there's just going to be positive tests popping up all the time. So to your point, the spread makes sense because ideally you want these guys to be like, look, if this guy's testing positive and we've got 2 weeks to play with, go put him in a chamber, and if someone like Baron Browning tests positive for Ohio State, good God, let's go give him a week. And then we'll cross our fingers that a week from now he tests negative so we can get him back out on the field. And I think there's going to be a lot of that. But you're not going to be able to get around. A ton of these guys are going to be testing positive all the time. It could be as much as, if you look at numbers, like as much as like a quarter of the guys at some point test positive. So then it's like, there's going to be a lot of pulling guys for games. There's going to be a lot of shutting stuff down, and it's going to be a mess. The best they can do is spread it out and give them time to try to deal with it.
Yep. All right, let's get off college football for a little bit. Let's move into something completely different. Okay. Patrick Mahomes got paid.
Yes.
12 years, $400 to $500 million. It's going to land somewhere in that ballpark, depending on his escalators. My question to you is this. I've been thinking about it ever since I saw that contract come through. What athlete, is there another athlete you would offer 12 years, 400 to 500? Who's worth that money? I came up with one name, and it's the same person. I know you love him. We text all the time about this guy, Wonder Boy. Is he the only person in the world that you would offer 12 years, $500 million to right now?
It is funny. Like, we're talking about Christian Pulisic, the Wonder Boy from Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I'm only just – so is he Pat Mahomes' caliber? No, because Mahomes, you could easily argue, is the best football player on the planet right now.
And he's not the best player in his sport in the world. Maybe.
Right. And he's
though.
Yeah, and he's in his prime at the most important position in the sport, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, there's a whole other discussion where I'm like, once you get up to this kind of money, in football, what's he looking at? 180 guaranteed. If he got hurt tomorrow, he pockets $180. We were joking, like $400 million. I get it. Like, technically, he could have gotten more in the market. Whatever. It's like the guy says in Wall Street, how many boats can you water ski behind? It's like there's The amount of money he's going to guarantee.
When that's not any endorsements. I mean, we don't think he's getting hundreds of millions of dollars in endorsements.
Right. I mean, people say like, yeah, he might not play out the contract, but like if he $200 million, if he pockets $200 million after tax, just people understand the way finance works. He can park that money in a bank at 3% interest. That's $6 million a year to do nothing for the rest of his life. I mean, that's how much money that is.
And whatever. If he doesn't make money doing anything else ever again.
Right, exactly. It's like he's good. He didn't get like taken advantage of by the system. Like
not at all.
Fine. And frankly, like it's like that Kansas City could give him that kind of money and not be just broken as a franchise. It's kind of a win for everyone. The reason I think of Pulisic, and not just because I'm a soccer guy, and not just because he, in the last 2 weeks, has played better than any American has ever played in any 2-week stretch ever.
Yeah, ever.
And with Corona and everything else going on, and the fact that the Premier League's playing to empty stadiums, people might not be aware of this, but there's never been an American soccer player who has played the way he's playing at this exact moment in time. The closest would be like the best Clint Dempsey season that he ever had. Probably his last year at Fulham would be the same thing. The reason he comes up relative to the Mahomes contract is the money is so much money that even if you compare it to like a Mike Trout, you're like, okay, well, Mike Trout, part of that is like guys don't get hurt in baseball nearly as much. They can fully guarantee that. And even still, people are like, that's so much money considering that, like, I can call my mom up right now and say, who's Mike Trout? And she's going to have no idea who that person is, right?
Well, the issue is with Trout right now, at his age, we found in baseball, you don't want to be paying these guys past 35 years old.
Right.
You don't want to be paying them $40 million, $30 million, $25 million past 35 years old. You can't offer Trout a 12-year deal for that.
Right. And I think
he's just not going to be worth it on the back end.
Right. And I think it's more of a statement about football because guys tend to get hurt and stuff because everyone knows quarterbacks are so valuable. Everyone knows Tom Brady was underpaid for 15 years based on his value. And Mahomes as a brand is worth 50 times what Trout is. Like he just is. Everyone is going to know. It's like a Steph Curry. Everyone's going to know who that person is.
Yeah.
And Pulisic has the potential. Because America really has chased this for so long. They tried to chase it with Landon Donovan and then
tried to make it happen with Landon.
Right. And Pulisic really is that. At this moment in time, and again, this is just a 2-week stretch, he's one of the 10 best players in the world right now.
Right now.
Now, realistically, year to year out, it's probably more like he's probably like the 40th best player in the world or 40th to 50th or something like that. But people have gotten so cynical about the fact that no Americans ever measured up. Right now, that guy is doing that thing. So you're talking in the sport that once you get outside of our little bubble is all the rest of the world cares about is that sport. And if it was a situation where suddenly, you have real World Cup success with a guy like that, he really is one of Chelsea's best players. He spends like a decade there. He globally is really respected, somehow pulls up the U.S. soccer. But realistically, he's ultimately in Europe still it's going to be limited by whatever the contracts are given. I mean, he has the potential to make Mahomes level endorsement dollars.
Yeah.
But in terms of a contract, I mean, it kind of goes, soccer contracts are a little bit weird because you get guys like Messi and Ronaldo.
Yeah. And
those guys sign contracts for ludicrous amounts of money. But then you have to understand, when an NFL contract is signed, that's backed by the whole NFL apparatus.
That's right.
The Constitution of the United States of America, finance laws. In Spain, it's
funny money.
Guy who you don't know where that money came from.
No.
It's yeah, I'll pay you $60 million a year. And you're like, well, I sure hope I see that money. Right. I mean,
it's all funny money, and they have very we'll just say loose finance laws.
Right, exactly. So, but in that situation, is there a scenario where Pulisic lights Chelsea on fire for 2 to 3 years? Real Madrid comes in and is like, we grab the entire U.S. market if we sign this kid. Here's all the money here. Saudi oil or whoever, like this sheik just sold 5 yachts. So here's $1 billion.
Yep.
Go nuts. Like there is that scenario.
And we own the US market.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the power. But again, he would have to replicate the way he's playing right now for several years to make that happen. But I'm not saying that's impossible. Like what he's doing right now, and thank God for all of us who are just so sports starved, that the Wonder Boy from Hershey is out there they play tomorrow. Twice a week, he's giving you something to hope for when we have nothing else. So thanks for that.
So
anyway.
good. He's so and to see it actually play out and really work itself out for an American player to go over to Europe and actually be able to hang with those guys.
Yeah. Yep. And he's one of those guys that because he's probably 5'8", and kind of like a little guy, he's a phenomenal athlete. I mean, he's a guy you can watch on video that he can dunk, and like he's one of the fastest players I've ever seen. And it's just like great because 95% of the time those guys don't play. We were joking. We were like, it's funny to think about the fact that if Pulisic was born in Europe and Chelsea's, let's say, top 7 or 8 other guys were born in the U.S., the U.S. men's national team would be worse than it is right now because none of those dudes would have played soccer. No. They were all like, guy like Tammy Abraham, like that guy's starting for the Bengals right now. Like there's like half of those guys are safeties and wide receivers. Ross Barkley, that guy is like starting safety for the New York Jets. Like we don't get those guys to play soccer, and Pulisic's kind of like a godsend. So yeah,
that's right. All right, we'll get off soccer. Yesterday, I talked a lot of NHL with Sam. Talking soccer with you, Gary's going to stop leaving me alone.
If you want to talk hockey, it's going to be a short conversation with me.
No, plenty of that yesterday. I'm sure people didn't like it. We'll give one NFL story. This was interesting to me because I'm super biased with the coach. Raheem Molstert came from nowhere with the 49ers. That was a super deep running back room when the season started. Guys started getting hurt. Molstert played great. By the end of the year, everybody knew who he was. The dude was a star, made them a Super Bowl run team, and now wants a new contract. Didn't get a new contract, and so now wants to be traded. Is it smart to leave Kyle Shanahan?
Here's when you brought this question up, and you brought this up to me, I was like, this is such an interesting question. It all depends on what we mean by smart. If he leaves the Niners, he will never have a season remotely approaching what he did last season. I mean, it won't come close. It'll be close. It won't be close. And keep in mind, yes, there was that whole narrative last season of, oh my gosh, look at how many teams missed on this guy before the 49ers finally unlocked his potential. There's a little.
I think it's a lot of Kyle. I think
some of that is true, right? Here's the big thing, though. You're an NFL running back. Get paid.
But the problem is, will the new team just pay you for what you did for the 49ers? Are they going to bring you in, trade for you? You're still on that old deal, and then make you earn their deal. But under their offense, you don't put up the numbers. And so are they going to actually pay you?
Oh, I mean, like he's demanding a trade, but it's got to be a trade and sign or something.
I would think the same thing is they have to find a trade partner that's willing to give him a contract now.
Right.
If he gets paid in the trade, you're 100% right. That is a win for him because life of running backs are short. Even if he stays with Kyle, he could have 2 more great years and then never be heard from again.
Right. And that's the thing. I think he's right now – really, so I would say, if he stays with them next year, he ought to have another really solid year.
Yeah.
But he's 28, and in running back years, that's 50.
Old.
And he's thinking, I don't care. I'm going to trade and go to some crap team But
Yeah.
if they give me a sign and trade right now, I can get some money up front. Great. It's like, go with God. If you can get a team to do that, do it. Get your money.
What's funny is so many teams are so oblivious to what other teams are good at. And they just think, oh, look how good he was last year. Look at his numbers. I'll bring him in and he'll do that for us. When you don't run anything close to a scheme like that, you just think you can make him reproduce.
Right, like if he goes to like the Lions or something, he's gonna fall into a black hole and that'll be it.
I don't understand. People do it all the time with Patriot players, and they leave and they think, oh, well, I'm going to get the guy that was there. No, you're not.
They do it all the time.
The smartest person in the world at football is coaching that guy, and you might think you're a good coach. You're not that good.
Right.
It's so funny to me that all these guys have such big egos. They think they can make what those guys are doing here. And every one of these coaches are good at different stuff. If you've got a guy that's a specialist and Shanahan's know how to find running backs and they know how to get productivity out of them, man, I wouldn't buy a Shanahan running back ever.
Well, plus too, I mean, it's like how if they lose Mostert, Shanahan's going to find another guy.
Tomorrow.
I guarantee
somebody else will be there.
But again, it's like Raheem Molstert, like get paid. If you can fleece some guy, and again, I don't want to throw total shade at Mostert. Like that guy's got unbelievable speed, and we know if that guy was on the Chiefs, he'd be absolutely crushing it too.
He's strong. I mean, he's built like a truck.
Right, and I mean, but yes, it really is. A lot of it's scheme, a lot of it's situation. I mean, right place, right time. I will say too, though, it's like teams are. I guess he's looking to try to find, let's say, that sweet spot, right? Because for a guy like him who's kicked around the league so much, his agent's probably like, look, like no one is giving you Todd Gurley money or anything remotely in that ballpark. But maybe we can find a sweet spot for you where a team is like, look, yeah, I'll throw $15 million at this guy over like 3 years or 4 years, and we'll just kick the tires on him and be like, look, if things break right for you right now, you could get like 5 or 6 in bonuses up front. And a year ago, you never would have thought that was possible. So it's like, fine. If there's some team that's willing to do that because they see the speed and everything. But right, to your point, it's like having guys that like, it doesn't make you the 49ers. It doesn't make you the Rams. It's like you don't become those teams just because you pawn off a couple of their players. Right.
So, anyway, I thought that was interesting. I like Molstert, and I'd like him to get paid. I think that's always good for a player to be rewarded with that. And last year, he was a pretty special guy, but I followed Kyle Shanahan's arc long enough to know I think he makes guys like that. And I think if they lose Molstert, then they're just going to find somebody else that we've never heard of. And next thing you know, that guy's going to be running the ball in the playoffs and looking really good.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right. Well, man, we'll get out of here. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your help with doing this. Once again, you can check him out with his buddies Scuzz and Sam at the West Lot Pirates. They are a lot of fun. They just cover Northwestern, the majority, and all sports. We like listening to all types of sports. But right now, you're going to get a full Big Ten preview, and it's a lot of fun. So
yeah, and like we said, one of the things we've been thinking about, right, is with everything that you've been reading and everything, don't you just want to just digest some just pure football content right now? You just want to talk football, not football if, not football when, just X's and O's. That's what we're doing. So dive into it.
We like it. I appreciate you. Thank you for your help. We'll get out of here. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yep.